Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Listen, if you're a focused learner ready to absolutely shatter everything you thought you knew about making money, well, you're in exactly the right place. Today we're unpacking some massive paradigm-shifting concepts from Robert Kiyosaki's landmark book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We're going to build a rock-solid financial foundation step by step. So get ready to unlearn a whole lot of what you've been taught since childhood about wealth, school, and what it literally means to be successful. Let's get into it.
Okay, let's dive into this. Why do the rich keep getting richer while the middle class just endlessly struggles in debt? It's super frustrating, right? Millions of people all over the globe feel this. See, most of us have been programmed to believe that working hard, getting a secure job, and stashing away a few dollars is the ultimate ticket to financial freedom. But if that's really true, why are so many incredibly hardworking, highly educated people trapped in this exhausting cycle of paying bills? To really understand this, we've got to look at something called the rat race, and honestly, it all starts with the foundational lessons we pick up at home.
Section 1. The Tale of Two Dads, a Paradigm Shift.
The whole foundation of this explainer actually rests on a wildly fascinating comparison between two very different fathers. The author grew up with his biological dad, who was incredibly highly educated. We're talking a PhD who studied at Stanford on full scholarships, yet he constantly struggled with his finances. Then there was his best friend's dad. Now this guy never even finished the 8th grade, but he went on to become one of the wealthiest men in Hawaii. And this is where the divergence truly starts. The highly educated, struggling dad had this habit of saying, "I can't afford it." It's a definitive statement, right? Boom, end of story. But the wealthy, uneducated dad, he completely forbade those words. Instead, he insisted on asking a question: how can I afford it? When you just declare, "I can't afford it," your brain essentially shuts down. It goes to sleep out of sheer mental laziness. But when you ask, "How can I afford it?" your brain is suddenly put to work. It has to exercise, get stronger, and actually find creative solutions.
Which brings us to this hard-hitting quote from the rich dad that I absolutely love. He said, "There's a difference between being poor and being broke. Broke is temporary, poor is eternal." This just perfectly nails the incredible power of our own thoughts. You know, even when the rich dad experienced a massive financial setback and was literally flat broke, he still talked about himself as a rich man. He totally understood that a lack of money at any given moment, well, that's just a temporary state. But a poor mindset, a mindset of defeat, that is a permanent trap.
Moving on to Section 2, Escaping the Rat Race.
So how do we actually shift our mindset? Well, it starts with understanding the trap that catches almost everyone, the trap of working for money. Most folks spend the absolute best years of their lives working for a paycheck, completely misunderstanding what they're actually working for. They think a job is the ultimate security, but in reality, they're running on a giant hamster wheel driven by raw, unchecked human emotion. Like the quote says, people's lives are forever controlled by two emotions, fear and greed. Or, we could call that greed desire. Here's how this plays out in the real world. First, the fear of not having money to pay the bills terrifies people. It literally pushes them out the door every single morning to go to work. Then, the moment they finally get that paycheck in their hands, the second emotion kicks in, desire. They start daydreaming about all the wonderful, fun, comfortable things that money can buy. Fear gets you earning, and desire gets you spending. It's this vicious, unbreakable loop.
You can think of it as the illusion of the carrot. Let's walk through it. Step 1, fear pushes you out the door. Step 2, you get your paycheck. Step 3, desire calls out to you. And step 4, you spend the money. And just repeat the entire cycle. It's honestly exactly like a donkey pulling a heavy cart, endlessly chasing a carrot dangling from a stick right in front of its nose. The donkey thinks it's moving forward toward a reward, but it's really just chasing a total illusion, while the owner goes wherever he wants. This relentless, totally exhausting cycle, that is exactly what we mean when we talk about the rat race.
Because of that cycle, we hit on a pretty brutal fundamental truth. A job is only a short-term solution to a long-term problem. Most people genuinely think that getting a raise or snagging a higher-paying job is going to finally solve their financial worries. But the thing is, more money doesn't cure that underlying emotional problem of fear and desire. Without the right education, more money simply leads to buying way more expensive toys. A bigger house, a much nicer car, and inevitably getting into even deeper, more suffocating debt. You just become a highly paid donkey chasing a slightly bigger carrot.
All right, Section 3, Why Financial Literacy Matters. Okay, if working harder for more money isn't the answer, what on earth is? Well, we have to shift our focus away from that emotional trap and look at the logical solution. And that solution is education.
Look, positive thinking and hard work are great. They really are, but they are completely useless if you don't actually know how money works. We need to build a strong foundation. I mean, you wouldn't try to build the Empire State Building on a 6-inch concrete slab, right? No way. Yet that is exactly what most people try to do with their wealth. To prove just how critical this foundation is, consider this famous meeting back in 1923. A group of America's absolute greatest leaders and richest businessmen, titans who controlled massive steel companies, utilities, the stock exchange, the whole shebang, gathered together in Chicago. Yet 25 years later, the fates of 9 of these titans were just tragic. Some died penniless, living on borrowed money, others went insane, some went to prison, and a few tragically took their own lives. These men absolutely knew how to make massive amounts of money. But surviving economic crashes and rapidly changing times requires way more than just making money. It requires knowing how to keep it.
So the crucial point here is this. It is not about how much money you make. It's about how much money you keep. We see this literally all the time today. Just think about lottery winners who hit multi-million-dollar jackpots and are completely broke 5 years later. Or professional athletes pulling in millions in their 20s who end up working for minimum wage a decade later. Money without financial intelligence is money that is soon gone. A sudden, huge windfall of cash really only accentuates the cash flow pattern you already have running in your head.
And this brilliantly illustrates why we have to understand the different ways income is actually generated. Which brings us to the famous cash flow quadrant. Check out the 4 letters, E, S, B, and I. Basically, people earn money in 4 main ways, as employees, self-employed individuals, business owners, or investors. Now, the poor and the middle class are deeply, deeply entrenched on the left side of this, right? They're working for money as employees or self-employed workers. But the truly wealthy, they operate strictly on the right side. They do not work for money. Instead, they create systems and make investments so that their money works for them.
This brings us to Section 4, the golden rule, assets versus liabilities. All right, now we are arriving at the absolute climax of this explainer. If you want to stop working for money and start having your money work for you, you absolutely must understand this shockingly simple, almost mechanical solution to escaping the rat race once and for all. Honestly, it is so simple that most highly educated adults completely miss it, mostly because they're looking for some super complex formula to solve their problems. But it all comes down to this one defining rule from the rich dad. Rich people acquire assets. The poor and middle class acquire liabilities that they think are assets. That is rule number 1. In fact, it's pretty much the only rule. The real reason millions of people struggle financially is just sheer illiteracy in numbers. They go out and buy huge houses and fancy cars, genuinely thinking they're acquiring assets, when in reality, they're just chaining themselves to massive wealth-draining liabilities.
To fix this, we've got to throw away all that confusing dictionary jargon. My apologies to any accountants listening right now, but seriously, forget what your textbook says for a second. An asset is simply something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. That is literally all you need to know. If you want to be rich, simply spend your entire life buying things that put money into your pocket. It really is that straightforward.
Now, what's really interesting about this next concept is how simple the path becomes when you acquire a real asset. Notice how the cash flows straight from your asset column directly up into your income. It is literally generating money and pushing it straight into your pocket, whether you are physically out there working or not. We're talking real estate producing rent, stocks producing dividends, intellectual property producing royalties. Those are true assets.
Let's move to the next visual and see how this builds, because the flow for a liability is the exact opposite. See how it snakes straight out through the expense column? It is a total financial drain. It takes money out of your pocket every single month. Mortgages, car loans, massive credit card debt. You might think that huge house is an asset, but actually, scratch that. If it's draining cash from your pocket every month from maintenance, property taxes, and a giant mortgage payment, it is functioning purely as a liability.
So, we can perfectly summarize the ultimate targets of the 3 major classes right here. The poor focus primarily on basic expenses, which results in just continuous financial struggle. The middle class, they focus on buying liabilities that they mistakenly view as assets, resulting in heavy, lifelong debt. But the rich focus relentlessly on acquiring true assets, which is what actually results in lasting wealth. At the end of the day, your personal cash flow tells the undeniable, totally objective story of how you handle your money and which of these 3 paths you're currently walking.
Which brings us to the absolute most important thing you can ask yourself today. The next time you get a paycheck, before you spend a single dime, I want you to ask yourself, are you buying a true asset or are you just buying another liability? Breaking the cycle of the rat race starts right there.
in that exact moment of decision. Keep expanding your financial literacy, keep asking the right questions, and most importantly, start putting your money to work for you. Thanks for joining me for this explainer and keep learning.